what is really interesting when you think about the idea of Stoicism is that this type of idea derived, in any case, from Plato. This is really interesting because indirectly, if we think about the Stoicism, Plato developed a specific type of idea, the relationship between independence of a city-state in this case, but specifically with the idea of confederation between the city-states. In fact, why Plato developed this type of idea? Because he considered the barbarians, in particular the Persians, who attacked the ancient Greeks, in particular during at the beginning of the 5th century BC. According to Plato, and we know that the Persians were important, in particular in the second part of the Peloponnesian Wars, that in fact the Persians gave the golden their wealth, their money to the Spartans, and in the end, the Athenian citizens lost the war because Spartans had the support, technically had the economical support of the Persians, and in this sense, the Athenian people lost the war, and the Spartans, with the support of the Persians, won the war. In this case, in any case, Plato wanted to develop a specific type of idea between independence and confederation between city-states because he considered potential dangers the Persians, and he considered that between the men who are rational, it is important to develop a specific type of convention of peace, but in particular of deterrence or ally. This is really interesting because according to Plato, if the ancient Greek city-state developed conflicts between them all years, and according to Homer, for example, according to the literature of the ancient Greek city-states, the idea that each god develops a specific type of conflict against the other god, and each city-state had its type of primary god, and between gods there is conflict. Therefore, also between city-states there is conflict. Plato developed a specific type of demiurge, a monism that assembles things to develop a specific type of assemble between things. Therefore, according to Plato, there is a connection between metaphysics and physics because demiurge assemble things that are in a sort of chaos, and then after this create the moral and creates the moral objective, an objective moral. This is the other hand. Therefore, the idea of metaphysics as demiurge that is the only main god and is the only god that assemble things and produce something. Then, therefore, the city-states couldn't have a specific type of different type of gods and goddesses because there is only one god in Plato. This is really interesting because, in this sense, according to Plato, the rational man had to consider the possibility or the necessity to arrive to agree to this idea that there is only the demiurge, not the other gods or goddesses. Therefore, it is interesting that if the rational man arrived to this, and according to Plato, all Greeks are rational, all Greeks had to arrive to consider the possibility to understand and to pray, or better, to have a specific type of creed in the demiurge. Therefore, it is really interesting that, according to Plato, with this type of premises, we arrive to a specific type of confederation between city-states. And therefore, the confederation between city-states had two types of idea, or better, premises. The fact that the Greeks arrived to understand and arrived to comprehend that there is only one God, or only one main God that produces something, and it is eternal, not only immortal, it is eternal, it is outside the time and creates the time, differently by the Greek gods. And the second way, we know that according to Plato, the Greeks had to do this, the idea of confederation, because there were Persians who are really, really dangerous to the Greek city-states. Why this type of connection is really interesting in the Stoicism? Because according to Plato, in this sense, in any case, there is only the idea between city-states, between the Greeks' idea of city-states, in the idea, therefore, of independence idea. With the Stoicism, there is, on the one hand, the idea that took Plato, but because Alexander the Great exported with his conquests Plato and Aristotle and the Greek culture outside the Greek city-states. And with this type of movements, with this type of development, Alexander the Great arrived indirectly to develop a specific new type of cultures, developing a connections between barbarians, better Persians, and Greeks or Greek Macedons. And in this sense, the idea of a rational, it was supposed differently, or it was considered differently in this sense, probably in this sense, or potentially in this sense. In fact, if Plato had a specific type of reason only between Greeks, because according to Plato, the barbarians hadn't a specific type of rational, only Greeks had made the main rational, with the exportation of a culture of Greeks developed by Alexander the Great, and with indirectly with the kingdoms after the defeated of the empire of Alexander the Great, or better, after the end of the empire of Alexander the Great, after the death of the empire, after the death of Alexander the Great, the empire of Alexander the Great, it was divided in different type of kingdoms. For example, the kingdom of Egypt, the kingdom of Syria, the kingdom of Pergamum, the kingdom of Macedon, etc. We know that different type of kingdoms develop their specific reign with different type of populations that are different between them and that were part in past of the ancient Persian empire or ancient Western Persian empire. This idea of the exportation of the Greek philosophy, the Greek culture, arrived in these territories in Syria, in Egypt, in Macedon, etc. These populations differently arrived to have this culture, and the kings had to consider the idea of power differently in relation with the idea of these populations. But technically, the idea of connection between barbarians and Greeks arrived to be present indirectly because Greeks continued to maintain their independence in the Greece, in the idea of city-state, but the idea of city-state, it was exported in this lens of the empire of Alexander the Great, and then in the kingdoms of the old empire of Alexander the Great, and the idea of stoicism arrived to be, on the one hand, in relation with the private life, because we have to rediscover something that was past, but in the second time, the idea of independence in relation with the metaphysics point of view of a logos, of a reason that thinks and finds something. Therefore, the Stoicism, what is the main idea of Stoicism? That there is a main reason that produces something, and the destiny in relation with the main reason produces something. And man, it's only under this type of main reason. The idea of ethic, therefore, it's metaphysical. And what also is this type of idea is not the idea of Plato. Metaphysical idea of demiurge that produce something and assemble things, as the Stoicism explained. But the Stoicism consider all men as rational, all potential rational, to comprehend this and to create, in this sense, a global idea of rational for the idea of the ancient societies, a global rational, the ancient Greek society better, or the ancient Greek region. This is interesting because, therefore, if this is it. In fact, the Stoicism, it was comprehended by philosophers of Syria, philosophers of Egypt, philosophers of Greece, philosophers of Rome. In fact, Marcus Aurelius, a Roman emperor, Epictetus, a Syrian philosopher, Seneca, for example, who was born in Spain. These examples, the first philosophers of the Stoicism, these examples historically are different in the sense that are of different type of cultures, these men. This is really interesting because technically the Stoicism, the men who studied the Stoicism and developed the Stoicism are an example that the idea of the culture of ancient Greek society was exported from the city-state, outside the city-state, outside the Greece. But at the same time, the idea of Stoicism comprehend all world. The idea of Marcus Aurelius that understood the ancient teaching of Alexander the Great indirectly. The empire of Rome, it's not only the empire of Rome. I have to answer to some responsibilities that I have, according to Marcus Aurelius. But at the same time, I know that there is the main logos, as Plato explained to me. But at the same time, this type of main logos, as Plato explained to me, now I comprehended that is global in relation with the cultures that are part of the empire. In fact, the empire of Rome is in relation with different type of cultures. Part of Europe, a part of the North Africa, part of Asia. This is interesting because if we understand this idea, we understand that Stoicism developed the idea of Plato in relation with independence and connection between cultures, or better, independence and confederation, in relation with the connection between cultures developed by Alexander the Great and these actions. And then the other Stoicism after Alexander the Great, on the one hand, considered the crisis of a city state, the Greek city state, but at the same time comprehended that if these cultures connect their culture, connect their ideas, probably much more men are rational. Not only the Greeks are rational, and therefore could be a reason that could comprehend all this, and different type of men potentially of different type of cultures potentially are in the possibility to comprehend the main logos, or with a process of rational theology, what we see in relation to what is metaphysical idea, can comprehend this. In fact, historically, technically, the Stoicism, it was studied by different type of men in this sense. It was a sort of also of promote, of study of different type of individuals. Ethical idea in relation with science idea. From the Hellenistic world to the Roman Empire. This is interesting. The idea of Stoicism as the main reason of the world that rethink the idea of demiurge of Plato and the first act of Aristotle, the god of Aristotle, interpreted in the idea of connection between cultures, barbarians and Greeks, during the period of Hellenism, that then saw the Roman Empire arrived, conquering the different type of kingdoms of the old Alexander the Great Empire. Alexander the Great died, and after produced something. Marcus Aurelius, when studied about Stoicism, considered the possibility that he was only a man, or he knew that he was only a man. The main duty of Marcus Aurelius was to defend the borders of the Roman Empire, but at the same time, and against the barbarians, but at the same time, he knew that the Stoicism, it was also probably for all people of the empire, probably also for the barbarians. And he understood that in this sense, it was limited in relation with the main logos, the main reason that all created or all decides. And if this is true, in the reason of Marcus Aurelius is the reason of an emperor, an important emperor of Rome, that it has an important duties as all the emperors of Rome. Therefore, he knew that this type of philosophy had to consider only in the private life, but at the same time, he could support himself to do some choices for his empire, for the Roma's duty. Because if it was only a man, he had some behaviors, some duties to develop, to add on the Roman Empire, but at the same time, the idea of man in relation with Stoicism helped him to understand that on the one hand there are the Roman duties, on the other hand there is the man of Marcus Aurelius with his limits, with his attitudes, with his difficulties. And this type of philosophy in this sense helped this man, also Seneca for example, to develop a specific type of private life in relation with political life. Division between these lives, but at the same time, the idea that the Platonic idea of logos, it was also present. as the main reason between cultures that now are present in the same empire, with Romans that, on the contrary of the ancient Greek society, on the contrary of ancient Greeks, weren't prejudiced in relation with other cultures. Because the ancient Greeks were prejudiced with all people that were outside of the city states of the ancient Greeks. Romans developed a culture, an empire, multicultural. Also, the Persian had this type of structure, but the philosophy, it wasn't developed in Persia, but in Greece. The Romans and the Hellenistic society arrived to reinterpret the Greek philosophy in relation with the idea of multicultural, because the idea of empire, it was multicultural. Rome understood that to maintain an important empire, a big empire, had to develop the idea of multicultural empire with a specific type of tolerance to the other culture. Greeks didn't this, in fact, didn't develop ever an important empires, only between them, not with barbarians. Roman did this. And the idea of reason, of stoicism, comprehend this in the fact that we were all barbarians, or we were part of a barbarian way, and now we are part of the stoicism idea of reason. Rome accepted to study the Greeks, to study other people that were not of their culture, were they not part of a culture. And it is really interesting because then Rome developed a specific type of empire, with also this type of philosophy, in this sense, Stoicism. That it was, in a sort of way, Greek, but in another type of way, technically, practically, also comprehended by technically and practically an empire that Greeks didn't develop, as Rome. Multicultural idea of Rome. This is really interesting. Multicultural idea of Rome. This is interesting. Bye.